sheep and oxen, yea, and the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, and the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passeth through the paths of the sea. Yahweh, how excellent is thy name in all the earth.
All right, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in Psalm 50, and we're at verse 16. And you remember, it was like we were about to transition. Let's read it, and we'll pick up where the Lord turns to the wicked and begins to speak. So, a Psalm of Asaph. The mighty God, even the Lord, hath spoken, and called the earth from the rising of the sun unto the going down thereof. Out of Zion, verse 2, the perfection of beauty God hath shined. Our God shall come and shall not keep silence. A fire shall devour before him. It shall be very tempestuous round about him. He shall call to the heavens from above and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice, and the heavens shall declare his righteousness. For God is judge himself. Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, and I will testify. Too low. And I will testify against thee. I am God, even thy God. I will not reprove thee for thy sacrifices or thy burnt offerings. I will not reprove thee for thy sacrifices or thy burnt offerings to have been continually before me. I will take no bullock out of thy house, nor he goats out of thy folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains and the wild beasts. I just clicked away from it accidentally. I forgot I made that change. Put the book down there. Okay. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountain, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee, for the world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Hold on, I need to clear my nostrils. Sorry. Okay, verse 13. Will I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? Will offer unto God thanksgiving, and pay thy vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. But unto the wicked God saith, what hast thou to do to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant in thy mouth? Seeing thou hatest instruction, and castest my words behind thee. When thou sawest a thief, thou consentest with him, and hast been partaker with adulterers. Thou givest thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit. Thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Thou slanderest thine own mother's son. These things hast thou done, and I kept silence. Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such an one as thyself. But I will reprove thee, and set them in order before thine eyes. Now consider this, ye that forget God, lest I tear you in pieces, and there be none to deliver. Whoso offereth praise glorifieth me. Unless they're using it first, it might be Asaph. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on that, and I haven't checked into the pronunciation of his name. Oh, my dog has come for a visit. Don't go in the bathroom, though. Oh, she can if she wants, I guess. Anyways, just so you know, we will probably, she's like, oh, I can't go in the bathroom, I'm going to leave. We're going to probably go into chapter 51 possibly. So I don't know exactly when that's going to start. If anyone was looking for the beginning of chapter 1, I'd prefer to do that in an entirely separate study, but chances are by the time we get down to 20 minutes, I'll have something to do, and I'm not going to end early. All right. So one thing I want to comment, just in the first part when he's talking to his people, the part about the sacrifices, everything up to there is pretty understandable. But the sacrifice part, I was just having trouble dialing in what he was trying to say. I will not reprove thee for thy sacrifices, the burnt offerings to have been continually before me. And all of a sudden I thought of that in the sense of, look at, there's two ways. Like, you're constantly sacrificing to God. You know, there are continual sacrifices being made to God. And God's going to say, I'm not going to reprove you over that. Whether these are to his people, to the people that listen to his word. Because in one sense you could say, why all the sin offerings? If that be sin offerings. You know, I thought of it in that way. Like, is he reproving them because they're offering it all? But it seems to be more that what he's saying is like, it's enough. You know, that you continually offer me sacrifice, and you think, you know, I need to do something more. Like Job, he was offering for himself and then for his children in case they hadn't, or for error, if they'd sinned ignorant or whatever. He'd made offerings in case he'd sinned ignorantly, and there were offerings like that people made, and it was meant to, you know, to cover all the bases. But that, you know, that kind of offering for something you may have ignorantly done isn't really amusing when God knows that you did other things that you did wrong. You know? Where you did wrong. What I'm saying is that he doesn't reprove them for their sacrifices. What he's saying is like, this is what I want. If anything I ask of you, when you are faithful to God, what he wants is us to be thankful for the things that he's given, and to pay your vows, which means keep your word with God. You know, that's like paying your vows to the Most High is what, when I say keeping faith with God, meaning, you know, we use the word faith, and I'm not saying I'm changing the definition, but to believe in God in a sense of his existence. But that's not really encompassing what the idea of faith is. You know, all the men on Jesus, all of his apostles believed in God explicitly and without reservation. They all believed in it. And when they believed in Jesus too, and they were on the ship with him, and the sea and the waves were roaring, they feared not because they didn't believe in God, but because they didn't trust God. You know what I mean? There's a lack of belief in that sort of, that he'll keep faith with us, or that this is the moment. You know, that we perish. But Jesus had said we're going over to the other side. So they had reason to believe. You know, like, I don't know what God's mission is for me. God hasn't said to me, Paul, you know what? You're going to write music for all of the book of Isaiah. You're going to get that revelation recorded. You're going to do the other things. You're going to do more Psalms, whatever. You know, you're going to do, this is all you have to do. And nothing can hurt you until you finish it. You know, God has never said that to me. I wish he would. You know, but maybe he shouldn't. Because, you know, some people, you know, might behave foolishly, knowing that, like, well, until I finish this, I can't be harmed. You know, until I complete the work. So, you know, Jesus, like when Satan tempted Jesus on the pinnacle of the temple, throw yourself off. So we are not only believing God in the terms of like, oh, he's real, or he really laid his life down for me, and I trust, I take that to myself, believing in the story. There is a keeping faith with. And it is reciprocal. We want God to be faithful to us, and he is faithful according to his plans and purposes. I mean, and it does include us dying unless we happen to live to the end of the world. So we're going to die at some point. So it's like not in being abandoned by God to die. It's the nature of what happens to all men. We must die in faith and then be raised from the dead. That's our only hope. You know, that's it. So we want to maintain that faith. And when we keep faith with God, as far as like in this psalm, it's like, yes, this has replaced all that. So we have Christ. We're always continually Christians. He looks at us and he sees nothing but Christians. You know, we are he sees his children. He sees the image of Christ in us being formed. You know, that's what he sees. He sees what we are becoming, not what we were. That's how he looks at us. It's not that he's ignorant of the others. It's just he chooses to put it behind him. Just as through sacrifice, God chose to forgive the sins of Israel. It's not that, I don't eat the flesh. I don't drink the blood. I don't need the sacrifices. I don't want them. And you do it all the time because you need it. And I've said this is how you should do it. Because you need a sacrifice. Because you don't deserve. Because you continually offend. You continually transgress. Because they continually offend and continually transgress, they need continual offerings. And you say, I'm not going to rebuke you for that. For that, as far as in the transgression, my monitor just, okay, there we go. As far as that transgression would cause the covenant to be broken, because the transgressions that we might commit, hopefully, are just incidental. That we're not consciously violating, unconsciously, living hypocritically in terms of God's covenant. We have to be very careful because, Paul says, if it was blessed is the man who condemns not himself in the thing that he allows. Or I forgot the exact formulation, but that's a basic precept in the scripture that, if you allow certain things, you have the potential also to condemn yourself in those things. When you say, "Oh, my conscience is clear," but it's like we have to answer to God, and we all have things we struggle with, but in as much as we are faithful to the covenant and to the key things, and also just not giving ourselves over to sin. When he talks to the wicked, notice there is some sort of desire. What hast thou to do to declare my statutes? What do they care to? Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. We mostly think of the wicked as the people who go, I hate religion and I don't believe in God. I just want to live this. I just want to live a sinful. I just want to live a sinful life. I want to live with my two boyfriends and the cheetah, or whatever. They just want to. They're just wicked in their sinful ways. They're just defiant against God, right? Rejecting of God, rejecting of that sort of conscious. They may have some sort of idea of a moral code, but the point is that they've rejected and they're just lost. And while they may speak foolish things and do and rightly perish, and all that, or God may show them mercy and give them light, they pale by comparison to the wickedness of others who do things like become pastors, but yet not keeping faith with God. How wicked is that? People who do not keep faith with God, we're not. The sinner who beats his breast is more justified, Jesus said, than the hypocrite who goes around talking about how great he is. You know what I mean? And it's like, so, that's the thing, is that they're continually, the people of God have a continual offering before God for their sins. And that's the Lord Jesus Christ. Because we keep faith with him. And hey, what is the wicked? What does wickedness look like? You hate instruction. You don't want to listen when you're being rebuked, when you're being told the truth. You hate especially truth. It's sometimes people get, when I look at, personally, when I think of that, I'm like, okay, Paul, do you hate instruction? I ask myself that question. You should ask yourself that's for that. But what about when things come personal? When it really strikes home. It's like you probably don't then either. Otherwise, you'd turn it off. But for some people, when things pierce their hearts, when some they don't like it. Oftentimes, certain teachings are hard. Jesus had certain things he said that were hard, and after he said them, there were people who went back and stopped following him. He's like, not everyone can receive this saying, except those to whom it is given. I forgot what it was. What was it? It was, I think it was about his death and stuff. I believe, and he started talking about what must happen. Or went back and, do I want to go down and looking for that? At that time, went back. Let's try that. At that time, went back. The idea that that's going to be found is probably small. Oh, gosh. Yeah, John. That's. I want to show you the results. All right. And then I suddenly remembered the verse, too, as soon as I saw it. Because I remember my friend Mark Nutting used to talk about this verse a lot. That was the last thing he said before that. But he said a few number of things. But the hard saying it started with was, it was in the synagogue. Oh, when he said it, this is the living Father that sent me, and I live by the Father. So he that eateth me. Oh, it's about eating my flesh and drinking my blood. And you may say, like, they thought he meant it literally. No, they knew he meant it the way he meant it, which was, you have to treat me like I'm God. You have to eat eat him for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. You have to eat and drink the blood and body of Jesus Christ, because that is the only thing that can save is the sacrifice of Christianity. I didn't bring it up, and I'm sure anybody who thinks of that was probably like a little like, why did you mention the communion in terms of Christian sacrifice? I guess because I've often had a very, like, even the symbols themselves, I look at as symbolic, meaning I say as oft as you sit down and eat your meals, it is in remembrance of him. Like when I break any bread, I'm eating the only life I have. I'm living by Jesus. You know what I mean? And I should remember that with every bite of food. I don't think there's a single bite or drink that I shouldn't regard as sacred, because it's giving me life. But the only thing that's really giving me life is Christ. I know biologically food is giving me life. So therefore, that which gives me life is Christ. It's my food. I mean, in a literal sense, we live our lives according to the words of Christ. We don't hate his instruction. We eat and drink his instruction. For in the morning, we start off with we break them. There is that sense of like, you may not be the one getting his hands dirty. You may not be the one actually doing adultery, but you're somehow partaking in this. I'm just saying, I'll tell you, I thought like, just how does that apply to my, it's like, I don't know, how does that apply to copyright law online? I don't know, with a thief, to work with a thief in some way, or to somehow be the lookout. To, because a lot of times that's how they introduce kids to. I remember my dad warning me about this, probably because his dad, never do any, never even, they'll say like, oh, just be the lookout. You won't have to do anything. You just watch the lookout or the driver. They all go, if something happens. I sat on a murder trial once, and that's what this is about. There was a drug deal that went bad in some way, and someone got killed, and the guys claimed they were just there to be the lookout. They thought that'll get them off. And boy, nope. Got convicted of murder. I didn't actually convict him because I was the alternate, but I sat out through the whole trial. I forgot about the law of the concept of, I forgot what it's called. It just slipped my mind. But like, yeah, you are culpable if you are the lookout, if you are the driver. If someone gets killed, you are as guilty. Someone steals and you're cooperating with him in some way, you know about it, you are guilty. To evil and tongue to friend, what amount to evil? It's like, it's not so much. People a lot of times, I confess, sometimes I speak unadvisedly with my lips. As far as the use of words is sometimes coarse. But I don't think he's talking about coarse language, which we should refrain from. Yes, I'm sorry. But giving your mouth to evil, it means to say and to order things so that evil comes about, so that destructive ends come about. You know what I mean? So the actual, you give your mouth to persuading people to do things they shouldn't to their hurt, to ordering the world in such a way. Lying, obviously, that's the next one. I want to do lying. Well, blasphemy, which is also a form of lie. But like blasphemy, saying things blasphemous about God, sure, that's one kind of way wicked. Who go to declare God's statutes, but they're not really believers. They're not keeping faith with God. When I say do the office of a pastor, I should qualify that. I should say take the office of a pastor, but do not do the office of a pastor. Because honestly, someone who's unbelieving, who really doubts God, but gets up there and faithfully executes a pastor's office and does a good job preaching the Bible, I guess. I mean, to do it without passion, I'd see it as a different sort of thing than someone who unbelieving gets up there and preaches it cynically, manipulating the text in order to, one, extract money from people, and two, to deceive people, or to just they preach doctrines that are popular. Based on popularity. They preach based on subjects which people want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear. as opposed to the instruction they need to learn to follow after Christ. They preach other things. And as much as they are unbelieving and derelict of their duty, yes, that's very wicked. When I say do the office of a pastor, I don't want to mischaracterize that like someone having a lot of doubt just doing the office of a pastor, or even having sin doing the office of a pastor or a teacher or whatever. I say peace, but I don't mean to exclude myself. Some people have called me a pastor. I'm not a pastor. I'm not. I know people. Some people say I think of you as my pastor. Okay, and that's all fine. You're taking instruction. You could say what I do is teach. Yes. Thou shalt not steal, whatever. Thou shalt not commit adultery, whatever. You should not give your mouth to evil, to speaking evil. That is, to speak evil is the idea of blaspheme. It's evil speech. Now people say, we talk about hate speech, right? It's not what speaking, that's a good question. You give your mouth to evil. There's different kinds of evil. Obviously, I wonder what that word evil is. Let me just check it. I'm probably not going to make the whole journey over there. You'll see it on the little bottom thing, but I'm just going to make the quick, or maybe we should talk about the word evil a little bit. We need verse 17, 18, 19. Evil. All right, evil. They said, that can't be right. My pastor said this. What do you mean there's no rapture? I don't need to concern myself with the end times. I won't even be here. And sure, maybe during the pandemic years, sure, I bowed the knee, but I don't, so what? It's what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Take a shot, wear a mask, And it became so important. Instruction. Don't do that. Every time I do it, I'm like, I did it. It's like, I shouldn't do that. I'm trying to be, well, how can we trust you? Hey, you can't trust me. Don't trust me. I don't usually say that because that's what a con man says. Brother, whether it be literal or spiritual or sister or brother, whatever. I don't, when he's saying it's like, here's someone close to you. I mean, it's not like he's saying it's okay to slander other people, but it's like a lot of things. If you'll slander your brother, what won't you do? Who do you regard? Have you no loyalty to anything? You know what I mean? Have you no loyalty to anything? People will make mistakes. They'll talk about people mistakenly. That's why gossip itself, even if you're telling the truth and you're just talking to other people, is bad. It really does something bad to you that you feel like you need to address. I mean, you got to talk about it. It says you should go to him first and tell it between you and him. And then, if he won't hear you, go tell it to another. Take with you one or two that they may witness the problem between you, and you can have it out between. They can see what's going on, and maybe they can tell you, what, it's your fault. Actually, we take his side or whatever. Just take two witnesses. What it's saying is, you want to tell people about it? Okay, tell your brother first, then bring two people, and then talk. Well, first you can solve the problem. Resolution. Now, not every problem, don't be so legalistic about everything that it's like, let's say some people are sitting around and somebody says something rude, and then somebody else says something back to them and kind of rebukes them slightly or whatever, and it's like the thing, just some little happening, right? You don't have to make a big, and then you go to somebody else and you talk about it. It's like, now, you maybe tell a spouse or someone really close to you. That person, you're confident if it's a spouse. Because I confide a lot, and those secrets have never left slander. So we're not. This is severe. Now, lesser forms do count, but this is the worst. There are, like I was saying, there's some small fracas, and people have a little back and forth. It doesn't necessarily need to be formally adjudicated with witnesses and stuff like that. If everyone's just okay, if you don't have some burning need to talk about over and over again, then you don't need to go to your brother. If you don't feel like you want to talk to anybody else about it, if you feel like you have to keep thinking about it, if it's going to affect things, you have some sort of obligation to tell your brother that they have offended you. Some sort of obligation. As far as, because if they've done something wrong. If they've genuinely done something wrong, there's a way to do it. It's not to gossip. It's to try to actually reconcile. If you can't be reconciled with them, then they're misrepresented you and come against you. You know what I mean? And the degree and amount of good you're doing means how much they're going to come against you. Right now, it's like, I used to like really go against Arnold Murray. He died, and also I feel like I said almost everything I wanted to say about the subject. There's a few outstanding emails I'd like to answer, but I'm not really. I just am not that passionate about it. Seeing I've done what I think I need to do, about as much as I could do. And people are like, how do I get my friend out of this problem? I was like, you got to figure it out yourself. Because I'm not like some sort of expert cult deprogrammer. There are people who are good at deprogramming. I should probably study it maybe and become one. I don't know. Because people have written me on that, but it's like, what am I going to do? Say, swipe your credit card? I'm going to study up on cult deprogramming? Because it's like, I would only be able to do that. To me, it's like something you do out of love, not for money. So I don't know. It's probably why I'm useless, because I should take more money. I should just take money and then I'd have, whatever. I don't know. These things has that done, and I kept silence. I let you get away with it. I didn't say anything. That you thought I was altogether such a one as yourself. You thought I was like you. I just don't care. God is cynical like me. Shrewd like me, like the parable of the, this reminds me of the parable of, not the workers' wages, the parable of the unjust steward, one of my favorites from Luke. The unjust steward is wasting his master's money, or he had mismanaged his house or whatever, I forgot. He had mismanaged it, and he was going to find out he's going to be put out of his stewardship. He was an unjust steward. And so, what he did is he went around and he wrote down the debts of all the debtors to make friends with them, so that when his master put him out, they would receive him into everlasting. He could go to, it's the steward. Well, I owed the Lord 3,000, and he let me write 30 or 300, and I paid it. And so then he cooked the book so it looked like everything was okay. Or whatever, and the master at the end of that parable, he commends the shrewdness of how he saved his own rear end. But it's like that honor among thieves, the commendation among thieves. Oh, you're good at evil. And I like that. That's what it's saying. You're good at doing evil, and I like it. You thought I was like you. You thought, hey, I keep getting away with everything, and I prosper in it. God favors me, and I can say whatever I want, and I can slander whoever I want, and it doesn't matter because I'm one of God's elect, because I am one of God's covenanted people. I don't have to care about how I treat other people, because the fix is in for me. Hold on a second. All right, God and I. We are we're just like that, and He is just so in for me. And I'll tell you what, that feeling, I draw from that feeling a lot. Like the feeling, God is. I look at the fact of how God has blessed me so much, and I'm very grateful and thankful, like He says. But I would never be so foolish as to think that God is blessing me because of all my good qualities, because of all the good I've done. He's blessed me so that I could do good and continue to do good, But He has not blessed me because I did good or because I was good. I always, sometimes when I analyze myself, and you do this, and I'm telling you this not because I want to, tell you all about me, but so you can think about it. You analyze yourself. It says examine yourself. It's one of the things the Scripture tells us to do. And and I think about. Sometimes I think like, why would God choose me? And I go over all my negatives, And I don't know if you should necessarily do that. Some people would not advise thinking about all your negative qualities, but I do sometimes. And then I could almost get down. But then it started occurring to me all the things that God, about me, why God might like me. And there's all these good things about me, positive parts about my character. It's like, well, there's that to say for you. And there's that to say for you. You know, I tell you, the good and the bad, but the good and the bad, it's a mixed bag. And I can't say like, oh, well, he was looking at that mixed bag and saying like, well, he's more good than bad. What I look at is he's like, I'm going to use that good and eliminate that bad, and I can make something out of that. That's how God looks at me. Not like, oh, he's a man. You know, it's the difference between what people don't understand. When God chose David, he said, I'm going to choose a man after my own heart. And people think like, oh, David was a man after his own heart. Like me, I'm a person after his own heart. I'm the kind of person God just, I think, yeah, I'm right in line. My brain just lines right up with God. You know, there's just like that. He chose me because obviously, why wouldn't he choose me? I'm the obvious choice. You know, that's foolish. Because God, what it means is God chooses us after his, meaning what he wants in his heart. It does not mean because it is, you know, when he said that, he was saying, you know, don't look, God does not look on the greatness of his stature. Don't look on the outward, because he was at the time a bit young and a little whip of a boy, young boy. I forgot how old David was, but, you know, at that age, he was a teenager. And some of them are very not men yet. I mean, I know I was not I was not the man you see before you, for sure. So there was a lot less beef on me, you know, back then. Both in, you know, the muscle and the blubber. But there was a lot less of both. All right. So he chose him not because he was the biggest, the strongest, the most, or that he was the most righteous. Either, because David was a faulty person who had a man killed after having adultery with his wife. That is extremely transgressive. Extremely. You know, if I were to do such a thing, I would expect, I don't know, I would not expect any forgiveness from God. And it's no wonder that David did suffer because of that. He had to go through some, you know, he would not have a peaceful old age. You know, he had a son rise up against him. And that son, and then he had to watch his own son, see his own son rise up against him and his own son killed because of that. Not by David, but by one of David's generals, killed his own son. You know, his son died. And for a lot of people, that's worse. You know what I mean? Some people would rather themselves die than have to sit there. I mean, because it's objectively, you're going to die anyways. And why live longer just to see a bunch of evil? Just to see torture and evil days. I mean, I'm not saying, because I do think, yeah, live to see torture. Live to see the evil days, that we may emerge the other side victorious. And, we all have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I say charge forward with the Lord, the light of the Lord in hand. You know, there's no darkness that we cannot dispel with this light. You know, we have the light. We have the power of the light. We have the power of instruction. We have the power of all the things that all the things that the wicked lack. You know, we have his words before us, not behind us. We give our mouths to saying the right thing, to building people up with our words, as opposed to tearing things down. Except for that which needs to be teared down, casting down imaginations and every evil thought that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Yes, we do tear some things down, but not good things. That's the problem. People who tear down good things, or tear down the things, or destroy the things that belong to other people, or steal them, or whatever, all that stuff. The point is, like, you harm people. You do harm. A lot of times people, people will often say about certain sins, like, where's the harm? One people choose often is things like masturbation or, whatever. And It depends, because sometimes there is harm, actually, in that, especially if you're married, and stuff like that. And when you're single, there is too. I don't want to talk about masturbation, actually, but I'm just saying it is. What I'm saying is people often say there's no harm in it. I say there is to you, right? It's like, well, I'm only harming myself. So what's your interest? I'm not interested. I'm not. But God is. I say, well, why is God interested? Well, because he's interested in you and everything about you as to whether he's going to choose you and make you one of his sons. And if you are chosen by him, then it's very interesting to him because he wants you to stop. That's all. So, he's interested because he wants us to be righteous. Because there's nothing honorable, nor, it's like, all my adult life, I've struggled with something, which is when I got to college, suddenly there was no more restraint. Like, adults weren't there to tell me, you better be in class or we'll give you a tardy. And if you're not here again tomorrow, we'll give you another one. We will call your parents, we'll send the thing. There was all this like structure in place to keep me in school, to keep me there. And as soon as it got lifted, they didn't know how badly I wanted out. So I was in college. I was basically allergic to classrooms. I went to a couple classes for a few weeks. I was like, it's high school again, but just, some classes are bigger, some classes are smaller. I looked at the coursework, and I just didn't feel like doing any more school. Now, that translated later, that release of that overlord, so to speak, the adults lording it over me and stuff, being free to do whatever I want, that's a particular challenge. When I was young, I couldn't just go to a liquor store and buy alcohol. You know what I mean? Because I tried that once when I was 18, and they asked me for ID, and I was like, oh, I forgot in the car, and I walked out. My friends dressed me up in like a business attire, a poorly fitted suit. I looked like a kid in a suit. I thought, this is not working. They're like, Paul, you look old. And I looked older than they did, that's for sure, but I did not, I looked young enough to question about ID. And this is back when you could still kind of get away with that. And they were really trying to buckle down. It wasn't like the old days where, dad could send his kid to the store for a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey. Like, Johnny, go down and pick up a bottle of whiskey and a pack of smokes for your dear old dad. I mean, I know that those days once existed, but not anymore, right? Because obviously that's how kids got a hold of alcohol. So they don't sell it to them. But the thing is, having the ability to just do something you want to do. It's so hazardous. The fact that you can do it. That's why I say a lot of righteousness that we have is innate. And I'm not very proud of it. And you shouldn't be. Like, I've never committed adultery. That's because I just don't have it in me to be that way. I don't consider myself like virtuous. Like, oh, I've staved off all the ladies. It's like, I just don't. Not interested. I don't feel particularly any kind of virtue in it. I have an effortless faithfulness on that regard. And when it comes to actual adultery, I've talked about other problems I have. There are lesser degrees of the same sin. I don't consider myself. That's why I say I don't take pride in that, because I know, I certainly have lusted with my eyes. At least once, more than that. All right, but I'm like, I have. And so I have to take accountability for that. Now, the degree of that is not as bad, but still, I'm not going to pride myself in my lack of adultery, though I want my wife to consider it, just so she understands the kind of man she's married to, right? That I'm a faithful man. But that faithfulness is kind of natural. And it's like, I shouldn't puff myself in it. I try not to puff myself up in any righteousness, because it's foolishness. And that was the first accusation someone said. When I started talking about holiness and righteousness as something we should really pursue, with a view that it might be obtainable, they said, no, you could never be perfect because you'd be proud if you're perfect. But that's definitionally, if you were perfect by definition, you wouldn't be proud. You'd be humble, because that's what perfection looks like. So, no, you're saying you would still not have pride. Well, I can already tell you, I'm not proud of the fact that I'm not a murderer. Because one, because I haven't had opportunities. I'm not saying I'm not just itching to kill people, but I know I got it in me under the right circumstances. Like if someone was harming my family, like if I walked in my house and someone was like trying to rape my family, I'm just going to say that in blanket, rape my family or whatever. Doing something, like obviously stressing them or violently oppressing them or holding them at gunpoint. If I could thwart that, I would, and I'd probably kill the person just to make sure that they never got to trial. I mean, I think that would be probably the way I would react, though that's probably just saying that just means that if it ever happens, I'll go to jail. Because I wonder about it, but it wouldn't be premeditated. I just think that I'm that passionate. I just think my passion, I just could see myself in the rage. Because I do rage. People say, people say I'm angry like in my writing and stuff, and that's not true. It's like the anger comes from frustration usually. Like me personally, I have a frustration issue. And that is a different thing than like that murder example. What I'm saying though, I know I'm capable of killing. I'm capable of adultery too, I guess, under the right circumstances, right? Not we all are. I hope that I'm not though. You know what I mean? Like I'm just saying that like, but for the grace of God, there go I. And that should be our attitude. I know that somewhat, I think of Job. When Satan was talking about Job, he said, well, you've put a fence around him. You protected him. I think of that some ways too, that God has put a fence around me. He's protected me from things like adultery, like murder. He's protected me and not made me subject to those things. So I'm thankful. I don't know precisely. I think I don't have, what I certainly know is this, that I'm not the type of person who pursues adultery. I mean, I would never do that. But, when I said possibility, I don't, it just means like, you get sucked into something where you get entrapped or something like that. But, I tend to, and it would have to be trapped because I've literally fled from people who were trying to become and this is before I was married, even though, but I mean, it's like I've fled from situations where unwanted romance was headed my way. So I don't know. I'm pretty confident that the Lord has my back in that, right? But so what I'm saying is we feel like there's a temptation to feel like God is for us because He is, but then to think that it's because we're something special. But that's not true. I'm not something special. I have good qualities. I have bad qualities. It's a wash pretty much. There's nothing to commend me. All my sins are on me like chains, weighing me down, and meaning that I will go down to destruction with no hope except that I put my faith in Christ and the blood and the sacrifice that He made on the cross. That is the only thing we have to save us from that. And that is why God looks on us. He didn't choose us because of our qualities. He chose us because He looks on the inward man, yes. And He does choose us with that in mind. But I always hate justifying God's choices, though, based on what He's looking at. So I do tend to think of it when that it's not entirely arbitrary. Because the choosing of God, you're not just chosen, you were created for that purpose. So when God says He looks on the inward, He isn't looking on like what you've done with what He gave you. He's just looking at what His purpose was for you in making you. He's looking inside you and seeing, yes, I see a sinner, but I also see the purpose for which I created that person. And since I created him for that purpose, that's the thing I'm looking on. And when I see them, that positive purpose that I created for them, that's what I see. And that's that you are not like me, but I see that I can make you like me. You are not one such as myself, but I will make you like myself. And that's the whole point of instruction. That's the whole point of all this, is to make us like Him. And we live for that purpose. The purpose we continue to live and we have breath. The reason I'm alive today is so that I can become more like Christ. I'm given an opportunity now to become more and more like Christ until the day I die. And God's going to take the measure of that. He's going to weigh it in the scales of not of whether or not I'm going to live or going to die, because that's already been decided. Because of Christ, I will live. But he's going to look at all I've done and weigh in the scales, and he's going to determine, like my service, what has it been? Gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble. The fire upon God's altar will determine the nature of my living sacrifice, which is I have lived a life that's supposed to look something like a sacrifice that's been offered to God because I've received Christ, the faith of Christ. And so naturally, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to live a life of sacrifice and obedience. That's what Christians do. If you've rejected that, you're stuck back at the beginning. You've never proceeded from, you never got into faith, as far as I'm concerned. If you're like not committed to that, that's not faith. That's not Christian faith. Christian faith is a commitment to the obedience of God. It is not just, I accept Jesus, the facts that he died. I just accept it. No, I accept that and all it represents. And that's quite a representation. So you don't have to necessarily, like I said, it's not about crossing your I's and dotting your T's, but it is about, the words on the page. It's not about having it's about the meaning of what everything that he asks us to do is. He asks us to do things, to listen and be instructed, but also so many other things, to live, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God. He hath shown thee, O man, what he requires of you. Offer thanksgiving. He's saying to the wicked, though, I will reprove thee and set them in order before your eyes. All the things, that's the purpose of judgment for the wicked, is that they may see and be judged. And it's not, I think it's kind of it's a very respectful thing. If you think about it, God, for him to have that second resurrection, if that's really true, if it's just a literal thing and not just symbolizing their end, and sorry if that throws me off, but if it's just a literal, it's semi-literal, because I don't imagine a big white throne in a long line, just waiting to be one at a time. And how long is that going to take? You know what I mean? But there is that fact, though, that they are raised and judged, though. I take that actually pretty much at face value, that the wicked dead will be raised and they will face judgment based on their works. But it is something, the fact that they could consciously come alive again for a moment to just understand what they did and the reality of things, it is a sort of torment, but it is also a kind of, hey, in case words affect someone inwardly the same way a punch affects someone outwardly. Like they're wounded. Their conscience is stricken. Their heart is pierced. They don't like that. As I said, they hate speech. It's speech people hate. I hate when I hear people say that. That's hate speech. That's all it is. It's speech you hate. Because it's like, I don't know. Because it's like, and what? Is it like if I say, all right, there ought to be a law that thieves go to jail. Right? Well, that's hate speech. No, you're saying those poor thieves ought to be held against their will? That men should violently take them and cast them into prison? Because you can't take someone except by violence unless they come quietly. But it is under a threat of violence. Because why? We hate stealing. We don't like it. You can't have a society with stealing. Just ask San Francisco. Just ask San Francisco. Interesting experiment they got going on over there. Very interesting. I'm glad I left cities. Because I don't know, because after this past couple of years, realizing it's like if things go wrong and we did nothing even happened, really. Nothing worth blinking about. Like if nobody had paid attention to that thing, yeah, it would have overwhelmed hospitals, but it pretty much would have run the same course. Except that they had, whatever. Maybe some people now that got the vaccine wouldn't have died. Okay, good. Whatever. But they certainly could have done a more targeted response, right? But I'm just saying, I think doing nothing wouldn't have made much difference because a lot of those that died were kind of scheduled to die. All their, people. I repeatedly exposed my old father to this thing. When people in my family had it, we didn't interrupt our schedule. We went over and visited. Yeah, if they were sick, they stayed home, or if they were in the house, they just, hey, I'm not going to kiss you today because I've got COVID-19, and yeah. But I'm saying, quick, I'm not going to bring up the whole thing because I just want to make sure it means what I think it is. Direct, a way, a road, a distance, a journey, a matter. His ways. It would be a fine way to say it. Ordereth his ways aright. I will show the salvation of God. We have to order our ways. Like I've been telling you. We have to order our ways according to as God's instruction. We have a sinful nature, but we have Jesus. And Jesus means that we've passed from judgment to life. And so in that state of which we should rejoice, our sins are behind us. Christ has washed us clean. God is not angry with us because we are his people and he is our God. And we are in his covenant. But we have to order our ways. If you want to see the salvation of God, really see it. You want to get to the day of resurrection? Order your ways. And honestly, notice they had here. Oh wait, in this they have this this is in parentheses, and this because that is, it literally means just who orders his to put place or set, who sets his ways, he that is set in his ways. Well, I show the salvation of God. Means set in the right ways. That's implied, right? But the point is, we want to be set in the right ways, in the ways of God, lest God tear us in pieces. When I bring up the word, it's because when Jesus comes, he's going to come and there's going to be a sword proceeding out of his mouth. And with it, he will smite the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. But also it says that the blood of the enemies will be just completely splattered up on his garments. He's going to be coming in garments that are stained red with the blood of his enemies. This tearing in pieces is not an idle threat. Those that forget God do so foolishly. And then we live in a nation of people who are forgetting God. Like I said, the way the leaders act, they think they can do all these things. They can just negate our rights and all. They're doing all kinds of weird things. It's like, man, they don't fear God. They don't fear God, and they don't respect. So they don't respect your rights. All right, so that's good. You want to see the salvation of God. You want to make it to the day of resurrection. Order your ways according to the word of God. Okay. Thanks for joining this study. We'll be back again tomorrow. Till then.